What is gaslighting? Many people still don't know what this is, and I feel that especially autistics are being gaslit all the time, like from childhood on, being told, no, this is not happening. You understood that wrong. That can't be. You didn't see that. Why are you so sensitive? Blah, blah, blah. All of that, right? Because of our different perception, which is real, but because other people have another perception, for them it's unreal.
How's that even going to work? You can't even see into our world. So how can you tell us if we exist in that world when you've never even been in it and you don't know what it looks like? It's just ridiculous. I completely think that if you're going to tell a person that they are or are not autistic, you gotta at least be speaking the same language, yo.
Especially in regards to this. Autism sensitivities seem to be caused by a kind of cleansed perception, unrestricted by language. Sometimes they can be seen as extrasensory perception, as those around them not only fail to see, hear, smell, or feel what some autistic individuals can, but also find it hard to imagine that these experiences are possible. Let us look at the most common features of autistic perception that can shed some light on the possibility of the unusual experiences, bearing in mind that qualitative differences in experiencing certain stimuli are different for different individuals. Hypersensitivities to sensory stimuli are very common in autism. The senses of some autistic individuals may be too acute, and they may see, hear, feel, and so on, stimuli that are undetectable by so-called normal people, neurotypicals. Jasmine O'Neill feels that it is her autism that enables her to experience her surroundings in a very intense way, both psychologically and emotionally. She describes her senses of hearing and smell to be so finely tuned to the environment that she reacts to tiny changes in weather patterns and atmosphere pressure, the way an animal would. Tito could actually feel the energy and see its pathway. The intensity of the energy in the room was very strong. I felt like a small raft floating in the midst of it. The energy bounced across the room, all around the walls, the pictures reflecting them, and the tables diverted them toward the ceiling. I could actually see the pathway of the energy wave bouncing around with speed. The researchers studied the rock paintings of southern Africa, the Great Basin and Upper Paleolithic Europe as illustrations of the shaman's altered states of consciousness. Of particular interest are the interpretations of the cave paintings dating to about 30,000 years ago, which were discovered in Chauvet at the end of the last century. the majority of scholars interpreted them as clear evidence that their makers must have possessed high-level conceptual thought. However, Humphrey came to these controversial conclusions after having compared these cave drawings of animals with drawings made by Nadia, a non-verbal autistic savant, who at the age of 3 showed an extraordinary drawing ability, line drawings of animals with a photographic accuracy and graphic fluency, but who had no language at the time and no ability to think conceptually. Humphrey provides a list of remarkable similarities between the cave paintings and Nadia's sketches, such as the striking naturalism and realism of the individual animals in contrast to our normal stereotyped images concepts of different classes of animals. The simulographic techniques used to achieve the drawings and the tendency for one figure to be drawn on top of another. After the publication of Shamanism and Cognitive Evolution by Michael Winkelmann, who hypothesizes that cave art images represent shamanic activities and altered states of consciousness, and the subterranean rock art sites were used for shamanic vision questing. Humphrey introduced certain corrections to his original idea. In his commentary on Michael Winkelmann, Humphrey avoids putting things as simple either-or antithesis, but rather poses a question. What if shamans resembled autistic savants some of the time? Yeah. We have a different perception, but this perception is just as valid as the neurotypical perception. Just like two different colors, one color is not more valid than any other color. Imagine if you would say, this color is disorder, this color is normal. Doesn't make any sense. They are all just colors. But there is some research about autistic perception. Barcelou 1999 emphasizes that perceptual symbols are multidimensional, originating in all modes of perceived experiences, and are distributed widely throughout the modality-specific areas in the brain. This researcher considers the perceptual aspect in a wider sense, rather than just referring to the sensory modalities. It refers to any aspect of perceived experience. Research findings confirm that individuals with autism have been saying and writing about for decades. For example, the Ashwin et al. Study has revealed that the autistic group exhibited visual acuity so superior that it lies in the region reported for birds of prey. Yeah, I knew it. Bird's eye view. Another recent study has shown that children with autism performed better than normally developing children on difficult visual search tasks. Increased sensitivity to vibration was reported by Cascio et al. And enhanced auditory discrimination by O'Riordan and Passetti. It has been suggested that autistic brains are tuned to higher frequencies, possibly due to neuronal microarchitecture. There you have it. The higher vibration capacity of the senses goes parallel with the acute, often overwhelming sensitivities to sensory stimuli, when certain stimuli, which are different for different people, are very disturbing to individuals with autism. For example, Temple Grandin describes her hearing as having a sound amplifier set on maximum loudness. Some autistic individuals may be able to hear some frequencies that only animals normally hear. Others can see air particles that become a background with the rest of the environment fading away. Wendy Lawson describes how noises seemed so much louder for me, and I had to move away from conversations at times because the noise hurt my ears. So, you see, this is a different perception. And just because neurotypicals can't perceive this, it does not mean that it can be invalidated, gaslighted, or devalued. Because that's traumatic. If somebody does that to you and thinks you are disordered and you have to change your behavior and adapt, that's completely wrong. Examples of seeing colors while hearing sounds in synesthesia are well known, and this is again the occipital lobe that is activated in this. Some individuals seem to see not only the colors of their acoustic environment, but also the density, shape, and movement of sounds.
That's why I get so pissed about neurotypical psychologists trying to diagnose an autistic person. It's like,
exactly, I so agree. And then they also may invalidate you and actually ask,
"What are you talking about? That didn't happen." My name is Terri Cole. I am a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, and the founder of the Real Love Revolution. And many of you have emailed me. I mentioned what I'm talking about is gaslighting. Are you crazy, or is someone gaslighting you and trying to make you think you're crazy so they can gain control over you? So many people have written into me saying, please do a full video on gaslighting because I want to understand it more intimately, because it's really hard to put your finger on. If you're not a person who is manipulating other people all the time, you start doubting yourself instead of being able to clearly see what's happening. So I want to start with just the definition of gaslighting. Like, what actually is it? So this is a form of manipulation that seeks to sow the seeds, right, of doubt in a targeted individual. So it could be you. So it's a form of manipulation that has you question your own memory, your own perception, and your own sanity. So the way the other person does it is using persistent denial, misdirection, contradiction, and lying. This attempt is to destabilize you, right? So that they're delegitimizing your beliefs and gaining control over you. If you feel as though you can't do anything right because you're always being criticized by your partner, if you wonder if you are a good enough girlfriend, employee, wife, mother, this is another indication. If you feel hopeless, if you feel joyless, right? Your life does not feel joyful anymore. That's another indication that someone is gaslighting you and it's sucking the joy out of your life. If you think about where you are right now in your life and you feel like you don't even know how you got to where you are, that you used to be a happy, fun-loving person, more relaxed, enjoying your life, but you're not now, that's an indication. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself, this is an indication. If you often feel confused or even crazy at work, because a lot of times you'll have a boss who is a gaslighter as well. But if it's happening at home, you feel like you're crazy, like you're misremembering everything. If you're constantly either being told that you're too sensitive or questioning that you're too sensitive, like a million times a day, you don't feel happy. Do you find yourself always apologizing? It could be to your mother, to your father, boyfriend, girlfriends, boss. If you're always saying you're sorry, again, this is like when you're destabilized and you don't trust what you think happened. So you always think that you're doing something wrong. If you have trouble making decisions, this can also be a part of somebody scratching away at your reality, at your sense of self. You think, no, that can't be happening, right? This is just like an anomaly to how we actually interact, right? This is not the norm. You think during the first stage, it's odd to you, but you don't recognize it as a pattern yet. So there is a sense of disbelief, basically, of that happening. The next stage is feeling defensive and wanting to defend yourself from the person who's gaslighting you, from their manipulation. So think about it, right? Instead of addressing the issue, what they'll do is they'll tell you that you're way too sensitive and that you're way too stressed. And that maybe you are sensitive and maybe you are stressed, but that doesn't answer the question of why you're being passed over. And so it's this distraction technique that they'll do to get you off guard and to avoid answering your question. So be aware of that. If you find yourself always defending yourself, whether it's at work or whether it's at home, this redirect that they will do for you suddenly puts you on the receiving end of like you did something wrong. So it's a very high level manipulation from the person who's gaslighting you. So you suddenly are in the position of defending yourself. Like you go in to make a complaint and now suddenly you're defending yourself. Like, what the hell? Like, how did that happen? But be aware that if you start being really defensive, that something is going on. And during this stage, you're driven crazy by the conversation because you have no idea how it started out as you wanting to like draw a boundary and tell the person how you felt. And in the end, it's like this endless loop of you defending yourself and being like denying what they're saying because what they're saying actually isn't true. And then the third stage of this gaslighting is depression. So by the time you get to this stage, right, you're really experiencing like a noticeable lack of enjoying your life, right? A lack of joy. It's almost like you can hardly recognize yourself anymore, even if you're going through the motions. And so the outside world may not even know that you're experiencing this, but you know that you're experiencing this because inside you feel terrible. You don't talk to people about the fact that this is happening because it makes you feel like you're crazy and you're afraid you're going to sound crazy. And they treat you like you really do have a problem, sort of. So you don't want to tell people.
For autistics, this is very much the case. Like, our perception is just different. It cannot be helped. And also shouldn't be. Dogs have dog behavior, cats have cat behavior. And the dogs are not telling the cats that cats should behave like dogs. Cats are cats, period. And where gaslighting comes in, where neurotypicals think that autistics are disordered. And then, yeah, you are basically being criticized all the time because you don't fit in. And then you mask, you pretend, and you don't say that this is causing anxiety, this is stressing you out, and that you have a different perception of things, right? Because you are already being judged anyway. Native tribes of many different countries and time periods have spent a lot of time and effort developing methods to induce holotropic experiences or technologies of the sacred. This often includes a combination of drumming, rattling, and other forms of percussion, music, chanting, rhythmic dancing, changes of breathing, and social and sensory isolation, such as staying in a cave, the desert, Arctic ice, or in high mountain. Deep within the caves, suffused with music and dance, inspired by whatever constituted their Ice Age soma, their memories primed, their senses sharpened, regressing to the state of innocent perception, of which Huxley speaks. Perhaps it was in that state that they were able to recall in quasi-photographic detail the sightings of wild animals. In that state that they were able to trace the outlines of these images as if projected by a lantern onto the cave wall. Humphrey 202, page 93. Humphrey is suggesting that they became functionally autistic, being temporarily in a non-conceptualizing state of mind. Only during their activity of shamanizing, by entering an altered state of consciousness which suppresses conceptualization. The suggestive evidence for this possibility can be found in some of the literature on psychotic drugs, including Aldous Huxley's classic account of his experiments with mescaline, Humphrey 202. Interesting. Psychosocial abnormalities in connection with shamanism are still occasionally mentioned in scholarly literature since the 1960s. There has been a shift in thought to identify shamanism with altered states of consciousness, to such an extent that these two terms are sometimes used as interchangeable. Native cultures use holotropic states for a variety of purposes: direct, experiential contact with the archetypal dimensions of reality, deities, mythological realms, and numinous forces of nature, the healing of individuals and groups or even an entire tribe, as exemplified by the Bushmen in the African Kalahari Desert, artistic inspiration, ideas for rituals, paintings, sculptures, and songs, and the cultivation of intuition and extrasensory perception, finding lost persons and objects, obtaining information about people in remote locations, and following the movement of the game they hunt. As shifts in consciousness are a key part of shamanic practice, there have been attempts to clarify what is distinctive about shamanic states of consciousness, though no consensus has been achieved. Boll's study from 1989 offers a phenomenological mapping of different states of consciousness, including shamanism, schizophrenia, Buddhism, and yoga. The researcher indicates that there is a variety of psychological states with considerable differences among them, while some scholars, for example, Peters and Price Willis, 1980, define shamanic ecstasy as a particular form of altered state of consciousness. Others argue that the shamanic trance state is not unique and is found in all kinds of magical religious practitioners. Riddington, 1990, cites a definition that identifies shamanism as an institutionalization of a transformation from the ordinary waking phase to a non-ordinary one, in which internally generated information comes to dominate and override decision-making and orientation function of the waking phase. A very interesting analysis of the products of shamanic altered states of consciousness is provided in the work of Lewis Williams and colleagues. Accomplished shamans, psychics, and spiritual healers can use such experiences in a controlled and productive way. Unlike the persons in spiritual emergency, they are capable of taking on the identity of others at will and then assuming their own separate identity after they accomplish the task of the session. During the crisis of psychic opening, the sudden, unpredictable, and uncontrollable loss of one's ordinary identity can be very frightening. People in spiritual crises often experience uncanny coincidences that link the world of inner realities such as dreams and visionary states to happenings in everyday life. This phenomenon was first recognized and described by C.G. Jung, who gave it the name synchronicity and explored it in a special essay in 1960. Jungian synchronicities represent authentic phenomena and cannot be ignored and discounted as accidental coincidences. They also should not be indiscriminately dismissed as pathological distortions of reality. The perception of meaningful relations, where in actuality there are none, this is a common practice in contemporary psychiatry, where any allusion to meaningful coincidences is automatically diagnosed as delusion of reference. In the case of true synchronicities, any open-minded witnesses who have access to all the relevant information, recognize that the coincidences involved are beyond any reasonable statistical probability. Extraordinary synchronicities accompany many forms of spiritual emergency, but in crises of psychic openings they are particularly common. Yeah, and they fucking exist. They really do. You cannot deny them, you cannot dismiss them, you cannot invalidate them. They fucking exist. This new model of the psyche is not just a matter of academic interest. It has important revolutionary implications for the understanding of emotional and psychosomatic disorders, including many conditions currently diagnosed as psychotic, and offers new and revolutionary therapeutic possibilities. An increase of intuitive abilities and the occurrence of psychic or paranormal phenomena are very common during spiritual emergencies of all kinds. However, in some instances, the influx of information from non-ordinary sources such as precognition, telepathy, or clairvoyance becomes so overwhelming and confusing that it dominates the picture and constitutes a major problem in and of itself. Among the most dramatic manifestations of psychic opening are out-of-body experiences. In the middle of everyday life, and often without any noticeable trigger, one's consciousness seems to detach from the body and witness what is happening in the surroundings or in various remote locations. The information obtained during these episodes by extrasensory perception often corresponds to actual reality and can be verified. People experiencing intense psychic openings might be so much in touch with the inner processes of others that they exhibit remarkable telepathic abilities. They might verbalize accurate, incisive insights into other people's minds concerning various issues that these individuals are trying to hide. This can frighten, irritate, and alienate others so severely that it often becomes a significant factor contributing to unnecessary hospitalization or drastic treatment procedures. Similarly, the accurate precognition of future situations and clairvoyant perception, particularly occurring repeatedly in impressive clusters, can seriously disturb the person in crisis, as well as those around them, since it undermines their notion of reality. Science is way behind in many ways. I discovered to my surprise that we carry in our unconscious psyche a detailed record of all the stages of biological birth. This was a finding that contradicted what I had been taught during my medical studies. Once I became convinced that this was an authentic finding, I put great emphasis on the importance of the birth trauma in a variety of areas, including a new understanding of emotional and psychosomatic disorders, the ritual and spiritual life of humanity, human violence and greed, sexuality, death and dying, and the content of works of art. In retrospect, the acceptance of the extraordinary psychological importance of biological birth was actually not a major intellectual feat. The brain of the newborn is certainly a sufficiently developed organ to carry the memory of hours of potentially life-threatening experience. Research also exists, which shows the sensitivity of the fetus when it is still in the womb, and the capacity to form memories exists in organisms that are much lower on the evolutionary tree than a human infant. Once I accepted that birth is obviously a major psychotrauma, it was more difficult for me to understand that mainstream clinicians and academicians are not able to see it, and that's the problem. And thus they remain stuck and dismiss and invalidate things that are outside of that perception, unfortunately.
Those that are on the spectrum have a really difficult life. There is a world outside the realm of what a neurotypical person experiences that is always trying to suck us into it. I don't have any labels for that world, and maybe someday I'll come up with one. But I think most of you that are on the spectrum watching this probably know what I'm talking about. Because so many of us experience this other dimension, this other place, especially autistic people. We kind of operate from that place to a degree.
I have done several videos on this autistic perception, and Olga Bogdashina mentions it in her book. And Donna Williams, of course. Both books I highly recommend to read because these are unique in what they say about this autistic perception. So many other books written about autism, they still have this disorder narrative, which is so annoying. And therefore, I stop reading anything that's coming from that corner, already being judged anyway. And if you want to understand the autistic brain, how we perceive the world, you have to come over to this side of the right hemisphere perception. What I have found very helpful is working with this in order to be within my own window of tolerance, so I actually can
navigate a life where you're literally living between two worlds. You're literally living between two very real worlds. And if you're a primal autistic, like I said, that navigation process is going to be way more difficult for you, because your primal compass is calling you out of probably whatever reality you're in right now is in such opposition to the way you are wired that you feel that gravitational pull into nature, away from people, into becoming a recluse and secluded. And the elements of our existence draw you like a magnet. Fire, water, rain, the ground, the earth, animals, the sun, the moon, the stars, the wind. It just sucks you in, and it makes it that you don't want to exist in this whatever city life or whatever it is that you're living in, where you just have the hustle and bustle of all the stuff going on around you and people, and got to get, to work, and got to get an education, got to go here, got to go there, got to get gas, got to get groceries. And it's like, dude, I'm an animal. You know what I mean?
A possible explanation of animals' telepathic abilities has been suggested by Rupert Sheldrake, who investigated hundreds of cases of dogs and cats who can predict their owner's behavior long before the human displays it. In his book, Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home, Sheldrake provides his survey of over 1,000 randomly chosen pet owners who reported strange abilities of their pets, such as knowing that their owners are about to go on holiday. Oh yes, my landlord's cat, whom I sometimes look after. Always, she starts to display the same behavior and starts to come down to my flat a few days before they leave for holiday. Every single time. So I know because that cat is in front of my door. Before the landlords actually ask me if I could look after their cat again. Interesting, isn't it? Before they have even started packing, or when they are about to be taken to the vet. Sheldrake believes that the unusual abilities displayed by animals are in fact manifestation of a single capacity, a morphic field, to be very sensitive to changes in the activities, emotions, and intentions of people. And autistics, just the same, have this ability to pick up this same vibration, tap into this morphic field. We just do that naturally, spontaneously, all the time.
Like, that's kind of how we feel. It's like I'm an animal and you're trying to make me behave like a domesticated creature, and I'm not. I'm not meant to be in this friggin' cage. Let me out of here.
What helps me regulate myself is a walk in nature. It's so helpful, especially when I can connect to the trees around me. Got a bit wet today in the forest, but I so needed the forest walk. But then you can find nice shelter under a tree. That's so comforting.
In my wilderness, you know?